We're not the first ones to propose the theory that Dabi is Shoto Todoroki's long-lost brother-turned-villain, but it's been hanging around the fan community for quite some time, so we decided to take a crack at proving it. We gathered all the evidence that we have to date, proving that the My Hero Academia villain Dabi is Touya Todoroki, the eldest son of the Health Flame hero Endeavor. When Kohei Horikoshi's My Hero Academia first premiered, it didn't take long for Shoto Todoroki to become one of the series' most popular characters. His story in the Sports Festival arc quickly turning him into a fan favorite. Fans of the series like Todoroki for his interesting and rather dark backstory surrounding his father, Endeavor. Endeavor, aka Enji Todoroki, is a fire-powered hero who always came in second to All Might in the hero rankings. So, in order to surpass him, Endeavor sought to create a quirk more powerful than his own, via a quirk marriage. A common occurrence in the world of My Hero Academia, wherein two superpowered people have children with the intention of creating a stronger quirk. This is exactly what Enji did, which resulted in him being incredibly strict and ruthless with training his children. Enji's children, including Todoroki, hated their father for how he treated them, as well as for what he did to the oldest Todoroki child, Touya Todoroki. Thus far, we've yet to see Touya Todoroki in the anime beyond a flashback where he was only shown from behind, and the same goes for the manga. All we know is that something bad happened to him. The leading theory concerning what happened to Touya Todoroki is that he had enough of his father's strict training and attempts to push his goals and agendas on him. So he ran away from home, eventually becoming the villain known as Dabi. Where's our proof of this? Let's take a look at all the evidence that we have to date supporting this popular fan theory. Let's start with the most obvious evidence that contributes to this theory. First off, Endeavor, Shoto, and Dabi all share the exact same eye color, and Shoto and Dabi have almost identical facial features and shapes. Additionally, when a young Endeavor was shown in a flashback, his hair appeared almost identical to Dabi's. However, if having similar features like hairstyle meant being related, then all the characters with fluffy hair, including Deku, Bakugo, Mina, and a whole bunch more, would all be brothers and sisters. So let's take a look at some more concrete evidence. Something that's a bit more solid than shared physical traits is the fact that, like Endeavor and Shoto, Dabi has fire powers, a quirk called cremation that creates blue flames, the hottest kind of fire. Now, it's not like similar quirks don't exist. Heck, Bakugo's explosion power could easily fall into the same fire category. But genetics tend to play a big part in what quirk someone develops, something that Endeavor sought to take advantage of when choosing a wife with which he could make children with a powerful quirk with. Another example of genetics playing a part in quirk development is Tenya Ida's family, all of whom share the engine quirk in some way. This shows that similar but different quirks result from family lines, since the engines appear on different body parts for each member of the family. Further evidence that Dabi's fire specifically comes from the Todoroki bloodline is its color. Dabi's flames are blue in color due to their temperature, which is higher than Endeavor's flames. This is important for two big reasons. One we'll explain later, and another that connects with what we've seen in regards to the extent of Endeavor's quirk. In his fight with Nomu during the Hero Killer arc, Endeavor showed the ability to produce blue flames if the need arises, showing that he and his quirk's genetics have the potential to produce blue flames. All of these are surface-level observations that practically anyone can point out to help support the theory. However, the less obvious, less noticeable pieces of evidence are where the most interesting fodder for this theory lie, providing clues that Dabi is indeed Touya Todoroki. In order to present the deeper pieces of evidence, we must first present a theoretical scenario, a canvas with which we could create a painting using these clues as the paint. We mentioned this earlier, but the leading theory of how Touya became Dabi is something like this. Touya was born with his father's fire quirk, which Endeavor trained him to use, becoming a bit too strict in his training. Touya eventually had enough and left home after an incident that resulted in his burn scars. From there, he was recruited by villains, most likely because of his hatred for his father and, by extension, all heroes. Now, let's fill in the details of this scenario. Those who pay close attention to the anime and have read ahead in the manga will notice a few key clues that support something like this having happened in the background of My Hero Academia. Let's start with the first part of the scenario, the claim that Touya had his father's fire quirk. On top of having his father's red hair, further evidence of this came in chapter 202 of the manga, in which Endeavor revealed that Touya did indeed inherit his fire powers. This page of the manga is actually the key to the whole theory, revealing information that ties all the evidence together. In addition to revealing that Touya had fire powers, this page also revealed two other major details that coincide with the Dabi theory. The first was that Touya's power was greater than Endeavor's, and the second and important detail was that Endeavor deemed Touya a failure, an almost perfect copy of his quirk, but with a weakness to heat that resulted from his mother's ice powers. Unpacking that first detail, this fits in with the fact that Dabi's fire is blue, since Enji straight up admits that Toya's firepower is greater than his. So if his flames are hotter, then they would be blue in color, which is the hottest fire can be. It also ties in with the fact that Dabi can seemingly use his flames on a scale much larger than Endeavor. The second detail is much more important, however, since it fills in more information from our theoretical scenario. If Touya had flames stronger than his father's but didn't have the same resistance to fire as him, then that gives us both an explanation as to why Touya wasn't trained by his father after a certain point. That also explains why he was seen alongside his brother and sister in being separated from Shoto, a choice by Endeavor to keep Shoto away from failures, and a possible cause of the burn scars that Dabi has. Perhaps Touya attempted to learn Endeavor's super moves and techniques, but his skin couldn't handle the techniques, leading him to be cast aside. Then, upon seeing that Shoto was receiving their father's attention and having a successful hybrid quirk, Touya may have attempted to train himself further, pushing his fire's limits to extremes. This may have led Touya to hurt himself with his own flames, severely burning his body. You might be thinking that it doesn't make sense for a person's powers to hurt themselves, since Endeavor's flames don't hurt him. But remember that Toya's mother, Rei, has an ice quirk that, instead of making a hybrid like Enji wanted, ended up making Toya's skin and body weak to heat. Additionally, the series protagonist, Izuku Midoriya, is the perfect example of a person's quirk not fitting with their body, an occurrence that can also happen with natural-born quirks, like in the case of Yuga Aoyama, whose quirk can make him sick. Suffice to say, it's by no means breaking the rules of the world of My Hero Academia for a person to have a quirk that can damage their own body. So if Toya's weak constitution led him to hurt himself, then it's not crazy to think that these injuries, the result of trying to impress his ironically cold-natured father, combined with his father's abuse, were enough to cause Touya to run away from home. Furthermore, in his hatred of his father, who rejected him as a failure and was the indirect cause of his scars, Touya could have easily become susceptible to the influences of villains, leading him to become one. This leads us to a meta piece of evidence that also supports the Dabi theory. One of Todoroki's most prominent features is the burn scar on his left eye, which was given to him by his mother, who felt hatred toward her son's fire half, seeing it as a representation of Endeavor's abusive actions. Recently in the manga, Endeavor also received a scar over his left eye, a result from his fight with the Nomu, known as Hien. This leads us to believe that Todoroki's getting scars due to Enji's actions is a theming device, one that becomes a pattern if Touya really is Dabi, since his scars would make 3 cases. By depicting Enji receiving a scar like his son, perhaps the show creators are hinting that all the fire-powered Todorokis have one, telling us that Dabi is indeed a member of the Todoroki family. Even if this isn't the most solid evidence as it looks outside the story itself, it's something to consider, since if it's eventually revealed that Dabi is Touya Todoroki, the scars as well as other theming devices would all make sense and line up perfectly. Again, it's a bit of a stretch, but Dabi's scars are very significant in a number of interesting ways in regards to this theory. And speaking of his scars, let's take another look at them. If you pay attention to their placement in comparison to where Endeavor's fire emits from, they're in almost the exact same areas. Since Touya is the son of Endeavor, it would make sense that his fire would emit from the same places as his father, from the eyes, chin, chest, arms, and legs. Also, if he has his mother's weakness to heat, then those very areas would be burnt if he pushes his flames too hard. If Touya really did hurt himself with his own fire, then he would be burnt in most of these specific emitter areas. Furthermore, and this is where things get kind of gross, when skin is burned, it shrivels up, which appears to be the case with Dabi's scarring. It often has to be cut open to relieve the strain of being tightened, which would explain Dabi's stitched-together appearance. So, as you can see, the page from Chapter 202 provides a lot of strong evidence to back up the theory that Dabi was once Touya Todoroki, the fire-powered older brother of Shoto, who was driven to villainy by his father's abuse. Abuse that Shoto's older brother, Natsuo, is unable to forgive Endeavor for. And speaking of the rest of the Todoroki family, the biggest hole in this theory that some fans point out is that neither Shoto or Endeavor recognize Dabi as Touya when they encounter him. However, this hole isn't actually that big, and can be explained rather easily. In the case of Shoto, as soon as his father realized his potential, he was raised and trained separately from the rest of his siblings, seeing very little of them of his young life. So it's not too much of a stretch to believe that Shoto barely saw Touya before he eventually left home and became a villain. So his appearance would be nothing more more than a blur in his memory. As for why Endeavor didn't recognize his own son when they encountered him in a recent manga chapter, the answer is practically the same. Enji cared little for the children who he deemed to be failed experiments of his quirk marriage, so he also barely saw Touya and the rest of his kids. Additionally, after a hair color change, severe facial scarring, and the passage of time, it would be hard for any father to recognize their son. With these explanations, there are no holes left in the theory. And with all the evidence that we've presented, it's very possible that Touya Todoroki, spurned by Endeavor's strict parenting and desire for a child who could surpass All Might, pushed his quirk, which was much stronger than his father's, to the extreme. According to the theory, he either did this to redeem himself after his father deemed him a failure, or as a direct result of Endeavor pushing him to be his successor. Either way, Touya ended up burning himself severely, resulting in terrible burn scars and a burning hatred for his father, and eventually, all heroes. With this hatred, Touya left home and was recruited by villains, who turned him to a life of super-powered crime. Thus, Dabi was born from the ashes of Touya Todoroki's former life. So, there's our theory and all the proof, evidence, and clues we could find to back it up. Though there's obviously much more to be revealed as the manga rolls on, it seems like the direction the show is leading us towards is the big reveal that Dabi is the long-lost Todoroki brother. Of course, while all of the evidence we've presented is rather convincing, we could still be completely wrong, and Dabi could be a red herring for what happened to the long-lost Touya Todoroki. At the end of the day, we'll just have to wait and see.